We could see one or multiple new faces because of the absence of Joey Votto early on to begin this season. What that could look like will be the focus of today's Aloha Friday edition of the Locked On Reds podcast.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds, and welcome into the Aloha Friday live edition of the show. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are free and available on all platforms. I'm your host, Stephen Offenbaker, alongside Jeff Carr. He's over there, and we are diehard baseball fans. We both have a passion for the Cincinnati Reds. We have taken our love of the game, we have taken our passion for baseball and the Reds, and we have turned that passion into information for you. On today's podcast, we are going to look at the impact of Joey Votto not being ready for opening day and how that's going to affect the Reds. I know it's not a fun topic, but it is a real topic, and it looks like what is most likely to happen coming out of Goodyear to start the 2023 baseball season. Jeff, we're going to dig into that, but before we jump into it, I want to tell everybody that the sponsor of today's podcast is FanDuel Sportsbook. They're the official sportsbook of Locked On. You can make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All right, Jeff, let's dive into this Joey Votto talk, because I guarantee you it's going to generate a lot of questions and comments for this Aloha Friday live show. So let's kind of frame this up for everyone. You know, Joey Votto has been trying to work his way back from that shoulder and bicep reconstruction. He is physically, you know, as far as being able to move his arm, he's there. He's at a point now in the rehab where it's about getting the baseball things back, getting in to be able to take full swings, being able to field his position, being able to do the baseball stuff. And he has said he's not quite there, and he's working at it. And that leads us to the question, what are the Reds going to do when we get to March 30th and Joey Votto is not able to be penciled in at first base?
Yeah, because I think with every passing day, this topic unfortunately becomes more relevant. I want to see Joey Votto at Great American on March 30th. You want to see Joey Votto at Great American on March 30th, but it doesn't look like that is – it's increasingly more and more unlikely, because the report was the other day that there is no timetable for him to make his spring training debut. And the more and more that we keep pushing that off, make no mistake about it, it's not as if like Joey Votto needs all of the spring training games, but he has said it that he wants to feel the different things that a game environment can supply that practice can't. Like the different things of, you know, just getting fooled on a bad pitch or having to dive and catch a ball that's just, you know, he has to react to or something like that. There's many different things that, try as they might, they cannot simulate it. So it's looking increasingly more likely like this is going to happen. So with Votto out, this is probably going to open up a roster spot, at least one. And that means that there's going to be a chance for a new face to join in. But who is that? But of course, we should start with the fact that there is no reason for Joey Votto to rush back.
No, absolutely. I am convinced when he does come back, you and I both talked about this. He will be one of those guys that makes some noise, and I really hope to see a comeback player of the year award in his future. I learned a long time ago not to doubt what he can do. And, you know, I firmly believe that the day that Joey Votto can't really be a contributing member of this team, he'll walk away no matter how much money is on the table. He's just that kind of guy. That being said, you know, I want to see him back sooner than later. I don't think there is any reason to rush him, Jeff, but one of the interesting things that this creates is to figure out how they're going to replace him. We don't just look at the position of first base, because as we've talked about, David Bell loves to tinker. He loves the players that can play multiple positions, and how they fill in for Joey Votto is going to create opportunities at other places. And I think we look no further than the most recent addition by free agency, Will Myers, as the primary substitute for Joey Votto. He won't be the only substitute, but then the dominoes start to fall, right, Jeff? It's okay. Well, we just moved a corner outfielder to play first base. So that is going to create an opportunity for somebody else in the outfield to make the team. Maybe your guy Ramos that you talked about the other day. It's going to create opportunities to keep the third catcher on the roster because Tyler Stevenson is going to be playing some first base. So it creates a lot of moving parts is what I'm saying.
100%. And it's interesting you mentioned David Bell because he was asked about this, and he asked about whether or not Joey Votto could play on opening day. And let's play a little bit of read between the lines, because we know with David Bell, he's going to give us a lot of nothing answer, but he does say some things that I think we can extrapolate a little bit. He said this: I don't have confidence or a lack of confidence that will happen. Talking about Joey Votto playing on opening day. With Joey, I just trust it. Nothing would surprise me. I don't have any more information today. I'm just letting it play out. When he comes back, he's going to be ready to play well. Obviously, we're all hoping for that to be soon, but I want what's best for Joey and our team. His plan, whatever that's meant to be, will work out the way it's supposed to. And when you kind of combine that with the things that Joey has been saying, he's been very non-committal. If anybody asks him about opening day, he's just like, I'm not focusing on that. I'm focused on getting healthy, on being 100%. So number one, he's not going to play, 75, 85%. He's going to play when he's at 100%. Number two, I think they're both saying the same thing, and that is he's going to be ready for March 30th.
Yeah, we know that Joey Votto is very regimented in his preparation and the things that he does to get ready to be a hitter at the big league level each and every season. And he hasn't started taking legitimate real at bats. I know we've seen video of him in the cage, getting the work in, getting the baseball memory fired back up. But I think you're absolutely right at this point. And this is the same thing we talked about with Nick Senzel, right? You reach a point in the spring where a guy hasn't done anything yet, and you really have to call into question their ability to just fire it up, because you don't want to run these guys out there and have them embarrass themselves, or run them out there and have them re-injure themselves. So taking both of those things into account, I think they're gently preparing us for a non-Joey Votto opening day.
And this is what Joey had to say as well on the matter. He said, it's not like I'm hedging against re-injury. I just know I want to come back and play well. I want to play every day. I want to perform. I want to make sure when I come back ready. It's not more complicated than that. And that was literally to the question of, are you going to be ready for opening day? He's been very I'm not going to say yes or no to that because, he could be wrong one way or the other, and he doesn't want to necessarily be wrong. Like if he says yes and then, it's opening day and he's not on the roster, then he's going to look a little bit silly. But remember in the past, he's always been a guy that's been a little bit non-committal about his injury status. But so far as Joey is concerned, he's going to be 100% when he comes back. We're starting to feel like that's not going to be opening day. So that opens up plenty of opportunity on this roster. You mentioned Nick Senzel too. He might open up opportunity. We might be talking about a couple of different roster spots that will have new faces in those spots, because one guy that we didn't talk about, and he is actually starting today at first base for the Reds, is Chad Pender. We talked about him a little bit whenever the Reds acquired him and how maybe he could, turn into Brandon Drury or something like that because he's kind of coming out of nowhere. But also he has the kind of flexibility that, like you said, David Bell wants to tinker with, and David Bell will be able to tinker with if Chad Pender's on the roster.
I'm interested to watch him play a little bit more. I'm be honest, I didn't know a whole lot about him when the Reds brought him in. I had to go dig and research him a little bit, and he looks like one of those players that could strike gold at Great American Ballpark. It's just a question of, is he going to be able to put it all together or not? So I'm interested to see how he plays through the spring. Chad is one of those guys that, when we talk about spring training matters and they could play their way onto the roster, he's one of those guys. It's going to come down to the end of spring, I think, with some of these players. Did the veterans they brought in, and again, I use that term very loosely, veterans, but the veterans they brought in, did they perform well enough to give the Reds the flexibility to send the guys they think might need just a little more seasoning in the minors to send them down and let them get that experience before they bring them up? Or, if all things being equal, do they bring a bunch of rookies north with them and start the clocks and just roll with it? This is going to be interesting how this plays out. And I don't think there's one right answer to just exactly how the Reds are going to go here.
I agree. And that's why he's the first guy that I thought of, but you kind of mentioned it, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it's clear that with Votto out, that may open up a roster spot or two. And it's time for guys like Chad Pender to step up and take that spot. But, kind of like you mentioned, could a rookie take the open spot? We'll discuss that coming up next. Before we talk about that, though, I want to tell you about one of today's sponsors, and that's Built Bar. When you are looking for healthy, but delicious, but healthy, but also nutritious, and also, chocolate, Built Bar fits into all of those categories because everything is covered with 100% real chocolate. Whether you're talking about a puff bar, which is literally just a marshmallow that has protein in it, or one of their regular bars, they all have chocolate covering them, whether they be dark chocolate, white chocolate, or milk chocolate. They fit into everything, whether you're talking about your diet, your cravings. Built's going to do that. And they've got amazing flavors. They've got like churro puff. They've got coconut puff. They've got a cookie dough chunk, which is a fantastic non-puff bar that I actually had the other day and I love. And really what it is, if you're looking for that extra boost in the middle of the day where you're like, man, it's snack time, but I don't want to kill this diet that I'm on, Built's going to help you because the macros are amazing. We're talking about up to 17 grams of protein in most of these bars and only 4 grams of sugar and 130 calories. Those are the kind of numbers that you can trust to help you deliver on tasty and nutritious. So check out Built.com today. You can still use the promo code LOCKEDON15 to save some money on Built.com, or you can go down the street to Walmart or Sam's Club and get you a box today. Walmart's going to have the 4-bar box, and it's going to have some cookies and cream, some double chocolate, some coconut puffs like I talked about a moment ago. Or you can head on over to Sam's Club and get a 13-bar box with brownie batter or churro. Yeah, go ahead and do it. Get some Built. You'll thank me later. Coming up on Monday's podcast, how can David Bell earn a contract extension this year? This is the last year of his contract, and there's a wide range of outcomes for this Reds team. Is there an outcome that includes him returning? Probably is. We'll discuss that coming up on Monday. And as we're talking about the roster and opportunities for different guys here on the roster with Joey Votto possibly missing time early on in this season, it's worth pointing out that coming up here in just a little over an hour, we do have the starting lineup out. Jonathan India is at second and leading off. You got Tyler Stevenson at catcher, Will Myers in right field and batting third, Jake Fraley cleanup, batting, playing there in left field. Chad Pender, like we mentioned, he is starting today at first base, and that's kind of where I thought of him first because it looks like they're trying to get that, position flexibility out of him because he kind of figures as more of a corner outfielder on this roster. Then you have Casali DHing and batting sixth. You got TJ Friedel in center and batting seventh, Kevin Newman at short and batting eighth, and then Spencer Steer at third base and batting ninth. And Steve, you look at Chad Pender, it seems like you said, he's kind of like the veteran here. He might have a slight leg up with that. And there's also been reports that he's a locker room guy. We know that we love locker room guys here in Cincinnati.
Ball player.
He's a ball player, real gritty guy, works real hard, gym rat, something like that. But could a rookie slide into that open roster spot? Because we got a lot of them.
I would love to see, I don't know. I would love to see them just go all in on the youth movement. But I don't think they will go all in on the youth movement. I mean, the easy answer is to say, you know what? We're just going to bring Christian Encarnacion Strand, CES. Man, I can't keep saying it like that. I can't slow down and say it like I'm
Christian
playing hooked on phonics. I can't do it. CES, it would be great to just pencil him in and think that he's going to be successful at the major league level right out of the gate and roll with that. If they were serious about that, they'd be starting those guys in these games. As we talked about, the rookies have had a couple of the rookies have had a lot of success, but it has all come in the second half of the spring training games. And that's important It's important to look where these guys are playing in the game, because the rookies have been playing against other minor leaguers. They've not really been in there against major league level pitchers.
Right.
So if the Reds are serious about going with the youth movement and maybe giving one of those guys a shot, they're going to have to start putting them in the game to start and see how they fare. I'm excited about how the young guys have played, but I'm not all in on put them on the roster now until I see what they can do against some of the more top tier talent.
Well, I think it's important too, because in my mind was just working through this rationale of thought is that, well, okay, we got Will Myers, we got Tyler Stevenson, Kurt Casale could probably play a little first base. You could probably work in a rotation there and then bring up one of the younger guys and have them on the bench. That's not why they're going to bring one of those young guys up. If they bring a young guy with them on opening day, it's because he's going to start. If Christian Encarnacion Strand, if Ellie De La Cruz, if Matt McClain is on the opening day roster, it's because the Reds and David Bell and Nick Krall believe they can play every day. And that is why there might be a little bit of a waiting period for a couple of these guys, because you get to the month of May, the month of June, the month of July, see how they're doing in AAA and be like, okay, they're ready. Maybe we can move the guy, the veteran guy, off of the position that we're going to have them play every day. And then you go from there. To say that they're going to know that on opening day is a much bigger long shot than I think we're trying to give them credit for. Because as much as we see the talent of these guys, you're right. There's an element of just feeling out your surroundings that a rookie goes through. We saw that with Hunter Green. Like we mentioned, like as much as I hyped up Hunter Green and said he is a Cy Young Award winner type kind of guy, like in his career, and I still firmly believe that, he wasn't that guy right out of the gate. And to expect that out of any one of these guys to come out and just go all rookie of the year like Jonathan India did, what Jonathan India did hadn't been done for the Reds in a while. So it's not something that happens every single season. I mean, even look at the Atlanta Braves. They had a lot of great rookies last year, but how long has it been since that's been the case? It just doesn't happen every single year, and it doesn't happen with every single guy.
All that being said, you did mention the one guy that probably could pull it off, and that's Matt McClain. And here's why. Let me flesh this out just a little bit. If they were to bring up one of these rookies and have them not be a starter, say, okay, we're bringing them up. You're the second baseman. You're the third baseman. You're the first baseman, whatever. Matt McClain's the one guy that could come up and still get full-time at bats, but just sliding into the positions of the other guys that are playing first base. So you bring up Matt McClain, Spencer Steer gets a start at first. Matt McClain plays third. Then you bring Pender. He plays, you can put Matt McClain in a corner outfield. Then you bring Will Myers in to play first. And then McClain can play the other corner outfield. Tyler Stevenson's at first base. McClain could be the DH that day. He could still get the full-time playing until Joey comes back, and then someone would have to go. But he's the one guy that I could see finding his way onto the team without really having a dedicated position. But I fall back again on Matt's had a great spring so far. He needs to become a starter. He needs to be in the beginning of games at multiple positions and show us that he can do it against that major league talent. And if he still hits like he's hitting right now, starting games, well, then we've got a different conversation. Then we've got to talk about how the Reds are going to put him on the roster and keep him on the roster. So I'm interested to watch that storyline develop, and it's starting to gain a little momentum. If he goes out and has a couple more games like he's had so far, it's going to be time to see him earlier in games and see how he does.
You find a roster spot for a good bat. I mean, that's what you do every year, any player, whatever it is. If the guy can hit, you find him a spot. And kind of like you mentioned, and to add on to this actually with Matt McClain, is that when you look at guys like CES and Ellie De La Cruz and guys like that, they're still really young. So you can rationalize, okay, maybe give them a little bit more time in the minor leagues to hone their skills and get ready. Matt McClain's actually kind of at the age where you're like, okay, I could see him being called up to the major leagues. He's been through college. He went to UCLA and got that Pac-12 experience, and he's kind of moved his way through the minor leagues a little bit quickly, but not like super meteoric quickly. So he could be ready if he continues to show this. But also to your point as well, if you talk about the different players that we have coming up through the minor leagues, they all seem to have a position attached to them. Matt McClain's the one guy that doesn't. Like, because you could envision him playing second base. Well, that's blocked. You can envision him playing center field, and yeah, he could still insert his name into that competition, but he hasn't played there yet. And we're seeing a lot of Will Benson, and Will Benson's looking real good. So that might become, blocked. That might be Will Benson's position to hold on to. So could Matt McClain grab a corner outfield spot? Could he grab third base or something like that? That's a hard thing to say, but the plan that you just laid out seems like the most likely plan for him moving forward is the super utility thing. And you need multiple guys, because somebody's going to say, well, Jeff, that's what you guys have been saying for Spencer Steer. Yeah, you need multiple ones of those guys. It's not as if only one guy gets an off day every other game. So I would like to see maybe later on this season. I would enjoy seeing that sort of a plan for Matt McClain unfold.
And that's where we've said is the ultimate goal, we think, for Spencer Steer. Right now, the start of 2023, we've been looking at Spencer Steer to be the primary third baseman. So that's not really a shift in our stance. It's just a result of there being one extra roster spot with Joey not being ready. So I still think long-term Spencer Steer is the super utility guy, but I do think someone else could fill that role temporarily until Joey Votto comes back. But one thing's for sure, with Votto out, it does open up a roster spot, and it's time for someone to step up and take it. And it's going to be really interesting to just see who that person is going to be. All right, Jeff, we're about to head into my favorite part of the Aloha Friday shows. That is the questions and the comments from the live viewers on the YouTube channel in the comments. And boy, there is some interesting stuff in there today. A lot of it's not going to make its way onto the screen, but we're going to get to that coming up in just a minute. But before we jump into the questions and the comments, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. We are less than a month away from opening day. God, I can't wait to be back in the Queen City. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers at FanDuel are going to get a no sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So you place your first bet, you could wager $1,000 on a spring training game tomorrow. Don't do that. But if you do and you don't hit, FanDuel is going to give you $1,000 back in bonus bets for you to try again. That's a pretty sweet deal. To get in on that, all you got to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Once you do that, go check out what you can do for bets on Major League Baseball. They got a lot of futures. We've talked about this. We've been talking about Matt McClain now for a couple days. There are actually odds over on FanDuel right now for Matt McClain to win the National League Rookie of the Year. They're not great odds, 100-1, but there are odds. So as Jeff likes to say, so you're saying there's a chance. Don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet today of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. You can make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. And now that sports betting is legal in Ohio, Locked On has you covered with the perfect show to help new and seasoned gamblers. You can download and subscribe to the Locked On Bets podcast for daily picks and analysis that are going to help you place the smart bets. Locked On Bets is available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow this podcast on all platforms, including YouTube. For the live folks here right now, thanks for being here. It's my favorite show of the week. Can't wait to dive into your questions and comments. You can also follow us between shows on Twitter. You can follow me at @SOffenbaker. That's with 2 Fs. You can follow Jeff at Jeff Carr. That's Jeff with 3 Fs because spelling is hard. And you can follow the show at Locked On Reds. All right, Jeff. We have reached my favorite part of the day. We're going to dive into some questions and some comments. I just want to say right out of the gate, there is an entire section of the chat early on that deals exclusively with your chest hair. We're not going to dive into that, but I could totally see your chest hair ending up with a parody account on Twitter at some point in time today. I'm just saying.
Don't tempt anybody.
No, it's going to happen, dude. If they don't do it, I am. It's going to happen today. Listen, let's jump into some of these. I saw one way back up. Let me go find it because it's from our good buddy Dave Pemberton, and I want to start there with the questions in the comments, and I can't find it to put it up on the screen because these guys are super active. There it is. Here we go. Dave Pemberton says, the Inquirer proposed the question, what do the Castellinis have to do to earn back the trust of the fans? The only answer, I think, is to win a World Series. What are your guys' thoughts? I've thought a lot about this because we've been seeing a couple of Castellini pieces show up in the daily media from out in Goodyear. One of them was an interview with Bob Castellini talking about his thoughts on the plan and the youth and all that stuff. And I've had these thoughts and I've asked myself this question. And Jeff, the answer I came up with kind of keeps me where I've always been. There is nothing that the Castellinis can do to earn back the trust of the fans in Cincinnati. I think if the Reds won a World Series this year, when they hand him the trophy, when Manfred hands Bob the trophy, Bob gets booed. That's what I think.
I find this interesting because how low of an opinion about 3 years ago did we have of Mike Brown? Pretty sure if he walked down the banks, people would throw bottles at him. He wasn't going to, and I don't think too many people would do that, but there'd be a couple drunks that probably have a mind of their own to try and do that. But now nobody talks about it, which is the best outcome for any sports owner, unless you're Steve Cohen and then people just, they build churches in your honor because you just spend all of your money on your favorite team. But I think that when it comes to what the Castellinis can do, winning cures all ails. And if they get to a point where we are in the World Series, and if they get to a point where this rebuild actually works and we are perennial, not just 1 or 2 years, and then we're back to this whole cycle again, but perennial contenders and thorns in the sides of the Cardinals and constant NL Central division champions and things like that. I think they can rebuild their reputation. But the key to what I just said is not 1 year. They got to do multiple years of this. And I think the other thing that would kind of help that out, and I don't know that they'd ever do this, but for me, I think it would be nice, is if they just came out and they said, you know what? We understand that this team has kind of floundered a lot under our ownership. We're taking our hands off the wheel. We're letting our baseball people do the thing because that's what we surmise. That's what we are low-key hoping is the case. But if they can confirm that, they can start repairing their reputation in my mind a little bit.
I'll say this, Jeff. You're right about that last part. The Mike Brown comparison, I understand where you're going with that. I don't ever remember Mike Brown directly calling out the fans.
No, that's true.
I don't remember Mike Brown not once but twice looking into a microphone or a camera and saying, where are you going to go if I don't put a better product on the field?
So would you say that the Castellinis have a worse reputation right now than Mike Brown has ever had?
Yes, absolutely. Because up at that time that everybody hated Mike Brown, this was still a baseball town.
Yeah.
It's when you compare the two, I just don't see how they can repair things. I really don't. Time will tell.
I'm sure the easy answer for most people is sell the team. But that's obviously not going to repair. That's just going to remove them from our minds. And
right.
Quite frankly, I think a lot of people would prefer that. But yeah, I think that if they were to remain the owners of this team, they got to win multiple years. They got to be a constant contender, and they've got to confirm to us that they are no longer meddling in the operations of this team. They are writing checks, they are setting budgets, and they are letting their baseball people baseball.
I thought that was a great question from Dave. I've been seeing these articles, so I wanted to start there and just kind of get that one out of the way early because I've been thinking about that too. Let's get back into this first base talk for just a second. There were some thoughts while we were talking about it, And let's get into some of that. Bill Dunstan says lots of time for Stevenson at first base until Joey is ready. Let me ask you this, Jeff. Do you think that could be the case? Or do you think that David Bell will stick with that plan that he outlined at the beginning of spring for Tyler Stevenson, which is that he's going to catch 40% of the time, he's going to play a couple days a week at first base, and then he'll DH the rest of the time? Which direction do you see that going?
I think that he could possibly play more at first base, at least initially, because the delineation was 40% catcher, 40% DH, 20% first base. It could be more like, 30% DH, 30% first base. Will Myers is going to get the bulk of the time at first base. Will Myers has shown himself to be a pretty decent fielder there in his career, and he has ample experience at the position. So I could see that being the case where he plays most of the time there. And then you could sprinkle in if Chad Pender is on the roster or something like that, or Nick Solak, or those kind of guys could get 1 or 2 starts, maybe just 1 start a week. But you don't have to throw Tyler Stevenson out there every day at first base, because I do think that sort of undermines the plan a little bit, because the whole idea of getting him 140 or 150 games hedges a lot more on DH than it does on first base.
How you say this name, Jeff? Sag. Okay. Knowing that Joey's time is limited with the Reds, I want him back as soon as possible so I can maximize the time seeing Joey play. I agree. Jeff and I are both right there with you on this, but it needs to be when he's ready. I don't want a bad Joey Votto just to say I could see Joey Votto. I want Joey Votto to come back and be successful. So I'm willing to wait, 6 weeks into the season, if that means when he comes back, he can tear it up.
I've said a couple of different times throughout spring training in the offseason that Joey Votto deserves mad respect for hitting 11 home runs and playing as much as he did last year on one arm. That being said, I don't want to see that moving forward. I want to see the new and improved Joey Votto with 2 arms and see what he can do, because I believe that he's going to come back super fresh and we're going to see him smashing baseballs. At least that is my initial belief as to how that's going to go down. And actually, too, and this kind of brings it back a little bit to what we talked about with Zips. Remember, Zips didn't even have him hitting more than 25 home runs. Like, his 95 percentile outcome for the year is him hitting 25 homers. And I wonder if there was a little bit of them preparing for him to not be in the lineup for maybe the first couple of weeks of the season or something like that.
For the audio folks, that we're going to wrap up the audio feed, and the rest of the Q&A is going to be available as a bonus episode in your feed a little bit later today. YouTube folks, stay right here. I'm going to wrap for the audio folks, and then we're going to dive right back into these comments and questions. Audio guys, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Coming up on Monday, Jeff is going to tell us why David Bell deserves a multi-year contract extension.
Now, that's not
right after he trades Jonathan India, because Jeff hates Jonathan India.
I said,
thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day.
I did not say that.
Now, for your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube, just like Locked On Reds. They are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Jeff, let's dive back into
and shout out to our Locked On Fantasy guys for a second, because when it comes to that idea about Jonathan India, it was not born of hate. It was born of more of a fantasy mentality of the fact that, hey, the Dodgers have a need. Could the Reds take advantage? And by take advantage, I mean that trade is super skewed for the Reds. And even then, I still don't know that I'm even willing to accept the idea of trading Jonathan India, because I love what I've seen from him so far. So no,
I love how much this makes you squirm. It's fantastic because this was all your own doing. you had to
turn it on me.
You had to know that's what I was going to do. You had to know.
For once, I just like to create a monster and it go right.
So I dropped that David Bell thing in there because we got a comment about it when we were mentioning it up front. David Bell deserves an extension. So I just wanted to kind of tease for Monday. I'm pretty sure you probably want to wait and talk about this on Monday, but I'll just let you tease to it a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too in depth because it's going to be our main topic on Monday, but this year has such a wide range of outcomes to it. The Reds could be a lot more surprisingly good than we thought they were, or they could regress and still be around 100 losses or something like that. And I don't know anybody wants to see that. But this is the last year of David Bell's contract. What can he do to get another year? And is this a case where he's just going to get another year, period? I think that's worth discussing. But I think that, there are some things that he can do to prove that he should still be here, because the dude has gone from managing a playoff hopeful to managing a rebuilding process. And I think that means that the whole goalpost has changed for what a new contract should look like for him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about this. I have some thoughts on single year versus multi-year extension, and we're going to have all that for you on Monday's podcast. So click those subscribe buttons right now so you don't miss any of it. Danny checks in and says, as someone that has been around since right before the Big Red Machine, there is nothing the Castellinis can do to earn back my trust. Where are you going to go? Away. That's where. Well, Jeff and I aren't quite there. We still go down to the ballpark every chance that we get. But listen, I've said way back, Castellini is not going to rob me of one of my favorite things, which is going down to the ballpark and walking around and talking to you all and drinking a beer and camping out down at the Budweiser bar and all the things I like to do. I'm not going to stop doing that because Castellinis were a jerk. But he's not going to, we're not going to be best friends. That's what I'm saying.
And I think that the best thing that any owner in sports can be is invisible. I know plenty of people would much rather not know anything about Jerry Jones who are Cowboys fans. And I'm sure there are plenty of folks in the Mets, the Mets country or whatever they call their fan base, that are really, really happy with Steve Cohen, but they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, because this has to feel like a little bit of just like, holy crap, this just feels like it keeps getting better and better and better. Because at some point, owners do something that fans hate. Doesn't matter what. There's usually something that happens. And hopefully it's nothing too bad, like talking about like the Washington Commanders and all that other stuff, but and what Dan Snyder likes to do. But when it comes to ownership, the best thing they can be is invisible. And we know for a fact that for years, the Castellinis have tried to, do this, or maybe like they're the owner of the restaurant that comes into the kitchen and starts, messing with the food that the chefs are preparing. Like, I wish they would stop doing that. And I wish that I had concrete evidence that they're not going to do it anymore, because that in and of itself made me mad enough. But then when you come out and you try to ostracize fans, whether they be casual fans, whether they be fair weather fans, or whether they be diehard fans in the Rosie Reds, then not only do you actually put yourself in front of the team, but you etch yourself on everyone's memory. Like you said, like if the Reds win the World Series this year, the first thing that everybody's going to think when they see Phil Castellini is, where are you going to go? He is never going to live that down. There's never going to be a person that forgets that. So congratulations to him for doing that, because he has etched himself into Cincinnati infamy. But when it comes to owners, they just need to be invisible.
I agree with you, Jeff. My mouse is locked up. Hang on.
That thought was getting a little long, so I shut myself down there.
Poofy-haired fancy boy checks in, finally with one I can post. The over-under on the Reds signing Aristides Aquino by July. This is funny because Mark answered the question for him. Aristides Aquino is making millions of dollars in Japan. He's not coming back because of that. And the Reds aren't bringing him back. They have moved on. But I love the daily dose of Aristides Aquino.
I thought it was funny. I was on a podcast with somebody, and one of their first questions was, what do you expect from... Do what?
Are you cheating on me?
No, I was like, yes. They invited me. What am I supposed to say? No, but if Steve comes with me, yes.
Yes, that's what you're... No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, one of the first questions I was asked is, what do you expect from Aristides Aquino? I'm like, well, I expect he likes Japanese food right now. I don't know.
Danny asks about Jose Barrero. He says the Jose Barrero experiment may have soured the Reds on bringing guys up too fast. Yeah,
Well,
no,
then
you
there's
gotta
Jonathan
remember,
India.
yeah, you got to remember what was going on also when they brought
Yeah.
Jose Barrero up. I mean, there was a limited pool of players to pick from. Everybody was out at Prasco. That was during the COVID season. In normal baseball, I don't think that we see Jose Barrero in that season at all. He'd have been playing down in Dayton instead of at Prasco. So
Dayton or I think
because
at that point he was probably
he came out of Dayton. He had been at Dayton. He had been high A, right? Or maybe it was Daytona at the time before they flipped.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. He was at high A when they pulled him to Prasco. So in a normal baseball year, we wouldn't have seen Jose Barrero. So the guys that are on the cusp, the guys that we're talking about now, have worked their way through the system more in regular baseball times. So it's different. Will it make him a little cautionary? Probably, but it's different.
And low key, like just based on the reports and based on what people are saying and based on their performances, these guys all sound like they have more talent than Jose Barrero did. Like Jose Barrero was the Reds' top prospect at a time when the farm system was ranking in the bottom third of the league. Like it wasn't a good, deep farm system whenever he was at the top of it. So to say, well, he was a top prospect at the time, like it's different. Like I wonder where he would rank and be a question maybe for our friend Doug over at redsminorleagues.com. But I wonder if you put the prospect Jose Barrero, who we haven't seen in the major leagues just yet, like back in 2019, that Jose Barrero, where does he rank in this farm system? Is he a top 10 player? Because I mean, I don't know.
That's actually an interesting hypothetical. We'll have maybe do that. We should write that down somewhere for off-season talk when we're trying to come up with topics write that down. Austin asks if Barry Larkin is back in the booth again this year. Yes, he is. This offseason, I've had the opportunity to talk to both John Sadak and Chris Welsh, and they both have told me that the booth will operate the same this year as like it did last year, with the exception Malachi saying is Joey Votto should call games until he's ready to play. Joey Votto will not be in the booth this year. Joey Votto was in the booth last year because he could not do any baseball things at all coming off of that surgery. Right now he's rehabbing and getting ready, so he doesn't have time to screw around. He's not going to be in the booth. That could be
shout out to him for still being around the team and still being around the game at that point. Like, I mean, most guys who are out for the year generally kind of kick back and just make sure that they rehab, make sure that they heal, and that's kind of it. But he did a lot of different stuff to kind of transform his own legacy when it comes to the Cincinnati Reds. Like, it's going to be a long time before we forget what Joey Votto did while he was hurt in 2022.
BR7 says that he has a catcher's room name for Aloha Fridays, the Catcher's Cabana. He says, I'm the worst, LOL.
Catcher's Cabana.
Hey, it's not the Catcher's Cave. Catcher's Cabana. I could roll with that. Tyler Stevenson told me he really enjoyed Maui. He's into the tropical groove. So
especially for the irony of having a very tropical name for Ohio, for Cincinnati. Like, yeah, I'm rolling with the Catcher's Cabana.
I'm bringing the Aloha, baby. I'll share it. I'll share it with all of Ohio.
The Catcher's Cabana.
See, look at you rewriting song lyrics. See, Catcher's Cabana is catchy. How's that?
Yeah, good job, you can just change that song. And yeah, that's it. Catcher's Cabana. We have decided. Great job, BR.
BR also says Matt McClain looks like he fell out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Man, I hope they bring him up fast. He is awesome. I agree. I reposted that interview I did with him. If you guys missed it, it's in my Twitter feed. You can also find it in the Locked On Reds archives on the YouTube page. A great talk with him. I think he's a great dude. I expect to see him this year. I don't know exactly when. I don't have a good gauge on that just yet. Like I said, I need to see more, but I think we'll see him this year.
I think so too, just because that last season that he went through was such a struggle that I think that is the thing that they talk about. Like Cowboy always talks about guys who get called up too fast and they don't experience struggle. Matt McClain experienced an entire year of that, and he is coming. I mean, the performance that he's putting on in spring right now, I firmly expect him to continue at AAA whenever the season begins. And then we're just going to see him continue to gain from the kind of a struggle that it was in 2022. And that's also a cautionary tale as well, because it's easy for us when we look at prospects who have a rough year to kind of write them off at that point. It's like, well, they're done. And even Jonathan India, when he was at AA, he did not hit very well. Or when he was at high A Daytona back then, he didn't hit very well in high A Daytona, and people were kind of wondering if he was still a prospect. Rookie of the year. I mean, hell of a, I told you so.
Funny you mentioned Jonathan India, because that's where Danny was going with this. He says that Matt McLain reminds him a lot of Jonathan India. Do you want to expand on that? Do these two guys remind you a lot of each other? I think, all things being equal, I think Matt McLain's a better athlete than Jonathan India.
I think so. I think, if you were to compare apples to apples and say, which one do you think would be a better second baseman? I think Matt McLain might actually be the better defensive second baseman there. That's not to say that I think they should move India right now for Matt McLain, but it's showing that the Reds do have that depth there. And India, whenever he came up, he was not a power guy. He wasn't really that highly rated of a prospect. Like, he was in the Reds top 10, but it wasn't as if people were like just fawning over him like we were about Ellie De La Cruz or even Jose Barrero at the time. So I really think that the way that Matt McLain profiles is very similar to him in that aspect.
Kyle checks in. Hey, Kyle, how you doing? He wants to know, would we rather Stevenson hit 260 or 270 with 30 or 40 home runs, or have him hit 300, 310 with 20 to 30 home runs? The second one, I think I would take the second one. I'd rather have him on base a little bit more and give up 10 home runs.
See, I think I'll take the first one, because it depends on where you're putting him. If you do put him in the 3 or the 4 hole spot, those numbers play a lot better, because those 30 or 40 home runs might be 2 or 3 run homers.
I guess that's fair. It's hard when you take those 10 home run swings, because what does that 10 home runs mean? And you're right. If there's a lot of guy on base when he hits those 10 home runs, that's kind of a big deal. It's a lot of RBIs. It's a lot of more stats there, but I don't know. I'm always like, get on base. I want the guy,
Yeah.
If we know that the batting average with the extra home runs is still like 260, I would rather have him on base at a 310 clip, I think, over the course of a season.
Well, let's say that between those two statistics, I think 260, 270 with 30 to 40 homers is him batting cleanup, and 310 or 300 to 310 with 20 to 30 is him batting second.
Okay, we'll do that. I'll take that. Oh, Jeff, this one's for you, I think. Greg asks if I can click the button. Good grief. None of my stuff's working, guys. I'm sorry. Do you guys see any major surprises on the newly released MLB Pipeline Reds top 30 prospects list? Did anything jump out at you?
I mean, it continues to surprise me a little bit how far Austin Hendrick keeps falling, because that's still in the whole category of, it still feels like we don't know what we don't know about him. But I think that the injuries on top of the strikeouts that he has shown so far in his minor league career just kind of seem to pile on. And the more people talk about it and the more people see him do it, the more they're just like, this guy's not even a prospect. I think he could surprise this year if he really starts figuring it out and starts hitting for a lot of power. And then people could be like, oh, well, maybe the Reds can get something out of this guy.
I'm putting this up for because Bill's reading my mind, and this is for the audio feed people that are getting the question and comments as a bonus episode. If you're not on the live show, if you're not in the YouTube comments, you are really missing out. Bill says, Steve's reading the comment thread like, what the hell is wrong with these people? There is a lot, Jeff. There is a lot, and I mean a lot going on in the comment thread today. These people are crazy, and there's a lot of stuff I can't dive into, but there's some fun stuff happening. Again, parody account, Jeff's chest hair. I don't know how it's exactly going to read, but it's coming. 100% guarantee. What's the next question, guys? I got to get through some of these conversations to find actual questions right now. There's a lot of talk happening. Sorry, I'm getting there, Jeff. Saj says the higher average does nothing for Stevenson. He's the one who's driving in the runs. I'd rather have him hit more home runs than get stranded on base all the time. That's a fair point. I mean, good talk about who's hitting behind him and what the bottom. If it's Joey Votto 5 or 6 and Joey's having a comeback player of the year season, that'd be great. I would take that.
Yeah, if you could have a 1, 2, 3 punch in the middle of that order of hopefully a resurgent Will Myers, Tyler Stevenson, and then Joey Votto, that looks pretty awesome. And then you just add Ellie De La Cruz to that halfway through the year, and you've got maybe a Will Benson that lives up to the hype that I'm putting on him. Like, this lineup could be sneaky good. It really could.
My goodness.
That is a word, by the way, and I would be interested to hear what people think about this. What is the one word that we're going to hear the most about this team? And if the Reds are winning the way that we think they could, getting closer to that 75 win total, we're going to hear the word sneaky a lot. Whether you're talking about pitching, hitting, fielding, you're going to hear a lot of announcers being like, man, this team is sneaky good.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that hashtag will probably get resurrected, right? Sneak on in. Sneak on in. Here's an interesting one from Bill Dunstan. Will India and Stevenson get traded at the end of their contracts?
One of them will be extended.
One of them will be extended. I think it's this is the season, I think, that will decide which one of them it is. If Tyler Stevenson is healthy and delivers and plays in these multiple spots and does well, I think it will be him. I think that's the guy they'll lock up just because of this glut of middle infielders that are coming up. If you've only got a limited amount of dollars, you lock up the guy that's your big bopper catcher, first baseman, DH, and you replace Jonathan India, which falls into your trade Jonathan India idea. So well, I think, and I don't say that one sarcastically, Jeff. I mean, it falls into that, right? Like at some point, one of those dudes gets traded, it's probably Jonathan India.
I think too, like if India bounces back as or close to as much as he's saying, because he's saying he's going to have a better year than his Rookie of the Year campaign, and if he can even get close to that, along with now the added value of hopefully what he becomes in the locker room, he might be that guy. I mean, he might be the guy that the Reds are just like, we want you around for a long while. I could see a long extension for one and a measured extension for the other. I don't think we're talking about one of these guys being traded before the end of their rookie contract. I think both play at least 1 or 2 more years and maybe 3 or 4 more years past what their rookie contract would have had them as Reds.
So a buyout of the last couple plus 1 or 2. Is that what you're thinking?
I think so.
All right. Mark asked about my Budweiser bar comment, and I'll clarify this because Jeff, I love when we run into people and hang out with people out at the ballpark. So Jeff and I frequent the Budweiser bar. It's always a stop on our rotation when we're at Great American Ballpark. So there's 2 areas. And I think what Mark's confusing is the Budweiser bar with the handlebar. The handlebar is down the right field line upstairs. You have to buy tickets to get in. That's a special area that costs more, comes with some things. The Budweiser bar is out in right field above the bullpens. You can just walk in there. There is an area of seating that you have to buy tickets for, but there's also rails. So Jeff and I go out there, grab a couple beers, prop up on the rails. It's my favorite spot in the ballpark, looking directly down the right field line. So anytime that we say we're out at the ballpark, you can be guaranteed you'll run into us making the trek out there to climb the stairs to the bow tie.
And we do always, the bow tie bar. We always call this like 20 million different names because I'll call it the handlebar, and then you'll be like, no, that's the other thing. And I'll be like, yeah, you're right. The bow tie bar. The bow tie bar is where it is. And then it's also kind of nice because, I mean, nice view of the river. You can look down to Paul Brown Stadium. Like, in between innings when your mind wanders for a second, like you can kind of indulge the wandering and just look around for a minute and get a nice brew as well because they got a very good selection up there.
I watched the fireworks out there on the 4th of July. That was pretty spectacular, actually, because all of Northern Kentucky was just going off. So, you could turn around and watch some fireworks, catch the at-bat, turn around, come back. Now, with the new timing rules, you'd probably miss 2 innings doing it that way. But
especially if Wandy Peralta's pitching. Holy crap.
No
How
kidding.
about
But
that
it was
former Red performance there?
definitely a sweet spot.
Now
Hey,
he did it
Joseph,
against the Pirates, so that's encouraging for opening day. But yeah,
this is true. This is true. Joseph Gaditza checks in talking about Nick Senzel. Senzel missing camp thus far puts him even further behind the 8 ball. Wish him well, but I don't know. The clock is ticking quickly on him being something or not. Yeah, the fact that he's not around while Will Benson is making an impression,
and
that's a
Henry
problem for
Ramos
him.
too. I mean,
Yeah.
Henry Ramos has to do a lot more than Will Benson does, but yeah, Will Benson's playing himself into a pseudo everyday role, or maybe like a 3 out of 5 days type role. And I mean, if
I
Nick Senzel
don't know
starts
how
the
to
year,
argue for Nick Senzel anymore. I mean, I don't know how to, you know what I mean? I don't know how to lobby for him. I don't know
And-
how to advocate for him when he's just got to go take it away from somebody at this point. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's just got to do it.
yeah, and it's unfortunate because we want to see him succeed, but the hardest part about that is he's not there. Like, you got to be there, you got to be playing, and if you're going to be on the IL still, which, like we said with Joey, we don't want to see him until he's 100% healthy. But that is really hurting Nick Senzel's stock right now, and the stock's already kind of low.
Jared thinks that Nick Senzel is going to come back and play all right as a utility guy and then get traded at the deadline. That's interesting. Jeff, if Senzel comes back and does, let's call it a 110 OPS plus, now that we have done an education episode on OPS plus, let's say he's 110, 115 coming back this season. If you can get something for him at the deadline, is it time to just pull the plug and get whatever you can get and move on?
I think so, and that's going to be an episode, and I don't know that it's going to be during spring training, but probably early on in the season once we know what the roster looks like. We'll compile a list of players, and it's not going to be near as big as it's been in the last couple of years, but a list of players that the Reds could flip at the deadline for something. I wonder if he would be on that list, or if he would be a guy that you would have to package with somebody. Like, maybe you say like Nick Senzel and Chad Pender or something, like putting those two guys together, and maybe you get like a top 20, top 30 prospect or something like that. It's not going to be Noelvi Marte or something like that, but you could flip them for a project type dude.
Mike Singer checks in and says, with Jesse Winker now in Milwaukee, will he haunt us this season? I think that Jesse Winker has a lot of things to figure out. There's a lot of stuff that came out during his time in Seattle that says he has some issues to figure out. And I believe that some of this stuff that we learned about while he was in Seattle was probably going on in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is just very, very good at controlling the narrative when it comes to things like that. They do a pretty good job of keeping the lid on things. So I think Jesse Winker is going to be more focused maybe on some reputation repair and getting himself right. I think he could have a decent season. I do not think he's going to be a Reds killer, if that's the question. I think that, he may have a moment or two, but I'm not really worried about having to play him or having him in the division.
No, and I think that Milwaukee will play him kind of like the Reds played him whenever, wow, I just lost his name. About 3 or 4 years ago, whenever he was part of a platoon. Gosh, I cannot remember the guy's name. But anyway, he was only playing against right-handed pitching. So, I mean, we'll see him against Hunter Green. We'll see him against Graham Ashcraft and guys like that. We won't see him against Nick Lodolo, because Nick Lodolo, I firmly believe, would carve Jesse Winker up, because Jesse Winker did not figure out how to hit lefties whenever he went to Seattle. That's always been the thing that's plagued him on the field. But yeah, with all the stuff that's kind of plagued him on the field, I really felt for him, like hearing about all the stuff that he was going through. And I felt like, yeah, probably some of that was going on in Cincinnati, and then it just got exacerbated whenever he went to Seattle, and it kind of became a bit of a problem for him. So I wish him nothing but the best, but I don't know, man. Like, when I look at Milwaukee, I look at a team that I think is going to take a step back. And I know a lot of people are still saying that they could compete with the Cardinals. I think part of that is just wanting to see somebody compete with the Cardinals in this division, but I think the Brewers as a whole take a step back this year.
Oh, you teased this perfect and you didn't even know it was coming. Austin wants to know, what are the final standings of the National League Central this year? Expand on that. How do you see the pecking order heading into 2023?
So this depends on the health of Paul
Mhm.
Goldschmidt, but I think that the Cardinals win the division. Now, if they have problems and Paul Goldschmidt misses significant time, and I'm singling him out. I'm not saying Nolan Arenado. I'm not saying Wilson Contreras. I'm saying if Paul Goldschmidt misses significant time, I don't think that lineup can replace him. So I think that they do take a step back if he is out. But if he's healthy, they win the division. I think the Cubs take second place. I really think that the Cubs have built something that this is the year. This is kind of like their moving year where they take that step forward, and then next year they're going to be a division title contender. I think the Milwaukee Brewers have just stepped in something with Corbin Burns, and I think it's going to affect the entire team. I don't know why they're kind of messing with that. They should have signed him for whatever he wanted for as long as he wanted, because he's one of the three best pitchers in the game of baseball. But instead, they're choosing to do arbitration shenanigans, and they're choosing to kind of jerk him around with the contract. So I don't know what Milwaukee's doing there, and I think it's going to come back to bite them even more so than the Josh Hader trade did last year. Remember when they traded Josh Hader, they went on a crazy like losing spell and lost out on any chance to go to the playoffs. So I see them being third. I do think the Pirates finish ahead of the Reds, and I think the Reds finish last, but I think that there's a 6-game gap between the Cubs in second and the Reds in last. I think
So
that
you've got the Reds in last place with 75 wins.
Yeah, because I think that the Brewers win 79 games. I think the Cubs win 80. I think so I guess that's 5 games. I think the Cubs win 80, Brewers 79, Pirates 77, Reds 75.
Okay. I agree with you about the Cardinals. I think the Brewers are going to be a little bit better than you do. I think they'll battle for it. Brewers will get a wild card. Cubs, I don't know. The Cubs are a hard team to read right now.
They do have a wide range of outcomes.
They could be really good or they could be not really good. But third place, I could see the Reds scrapping with them for third place, depending on how good the Cubs are. I think we're going to finish ahead of the Pirates. I know that there's this excitement surrounding the youth of the Pirates and some of the things they have done. I know Ethan Smith over at Locked On Pirates is really excited about the direction things are going. We have an opening day bet, by the way, Ethan Smith, Locked On Pirates. Because the Reds are playing the Pirates on opening day. If the Reds win on opening day, Ethan has to record his show in Reds gear. And if, God, I hope this doesn't happen. If the Reds lose on opening day, I have to record in Pirates gear. But I think the Reds will finish ahead of the Pirates. So that's kind of how I have the pecking order. But I want to jump in on something you said about Milwaukee, because it's interesting with the arbitration. Did you see that thread I tagged you in? That from was Tampa, right? One
Tampa
of the players from
Thompson, I think.
Yeah, with where he kind of just outlined very non-emotionally, just very, very, matter of factly. One of the players outlined their experience and the arbitration process and some of the things the team brought to the table to discredit, and what was some stats from FanGraphs, and like there was a lot of interesting stuff in there.
I found it interesting because he prefaced it all by saying he's just like, this hasn't hurt my relationship with the team. I understand it's a process that we all go through. It's something that everybody does. It's my job to prove that I am worth the contract that I want, and it's their job to prove that I am not worth the contract that I want. So I didn't, he said he didn't take any offense from it, but yeah, he was saying like they used average exit velocity from Baseball Savant. They used like some different sabermetric stats, especially like the ability to get hitters to chase and the ability to get hitters to like pop up and stuff like that. But the one that he said, and it's a stat that nobody uses, because he's like, I've never heard of this stat. And all of a sudden the Rays come at me with meltdowns, a stat that doesn't exist, but they used it to try and convince the arbitrator that he doesn't live up to the numbers that he's asking for. And the key, as he said in this long thread on Twitter about all of this, is the stats that they specifically chose has buzzwords in them that an
Mhm.
arbitrator that may not necessarily be plugged into the game of baseball hears those words, because they use blown saves and stuff like that. And he said blown saves, meltdowns, hard hit, like all this other stuff that, like, when you hear those words, you're like, oh, well, obviously he's not a good pitcher if he's giving up all that. It's like,
And it
ooh,
worked.
that's tough.
And it worked. Tampa won that arbitration. I just thought it was very interesting. I tagged Jeff in it on Twitter. If you guys want to go read it, it's available out there. It's interesting read. It's worth a few minutes. Jared follows up saying, as long as the Reds aren't out of it in the first month like last year. We did a whole show on this, Jeff. They're not going to go 3-22 to start the season, right?
I feel good about that. I feel good that they're going to come out with a vengeance. They're gonna start off the year a lot better. I'm trying to think of a better word than better, but they're going to start off the year a lot better than they did last year. I mean, it's not going to be hard. I mean, 3-22 is just historically bad, but I don't think it's going to be a situation where they're 6-19 or something. I think they're probably going to be closer to 500 for that same period of time.
Yeah, I would, and I would be okay with that. I mean, listen, I want to win all the games, guys, but if they're 500 through April, looking at the April schedule, by the way, that's a great start. It's a rough start to the season if you guys haven't looked at the schedule yet.
Major League Baseball heard what David Bell said this offseason and was just like, challenge accepted. We'll give you all the hard teams on your schedule right out of the gate.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. Hey, here's one we haven't talked about in a while, and I want to get your thoughts on something. Malachi says the Moose is still loose. Nobody has tied him down yet. Are you surprised that that's the case, or do you think he's quietly retired?
I think I'm a little surprised. I think what he is doing is he's waiting for a contending team to be desperate for DH help. He's not going to play in the field anymore. We've seen that. That was embarrassing. But also, the way that he hit wasn't that great either. He was very susceptible to strikeouts, didn't have a ton of power, didn't have a ton of pop. So I think what's happening is that he is asking for a certain contract when teams contact him, and they're like, you're not worth that anymore. And so he's going to wait and see, maybe a desperate team comes calling. But I kind of wonder. I hadn't thought about a quiet retirement, but that sort of sounds like a feasible thought with him. It's a bummer because I loved the signing. I loved when they brought him in. It's just it never panned out, and it never was going to after that first year, and he was just constantly hurt.
Pat asks, assuming I don't know what's going on with my computer, guys. Sorry.
Computer hates
assuming Contreras pitches for the Pirates on opening day, do you see an outfield of Fraley, Friedel, and Benson starting? With Will Myers. I guess Will Myers at first base.
Yeah, because they'll load up the lefty. Like we've talked about that. David Bell loves to do that. They'll load up lefties against a right-handed pitcher like that. I wonder. I think Roansy Contreras would be their opening day starter. I don't think it'd be Rich Hill, which I think Rich Hill's right-handed anyway. But that's why that team's going to be so interesting, is that they have an entire wave of starting pitchers that should be called up at some point this year, but they also went out and they got veteran starters to boot. So, and Robert Stevenson is randomly on that team. I don't know why, but he's there.
And that, Robert Stevenson, that's good. No Pedro Guerrero, but I'm not judging.
Pedro Guerrero is on the roster this year.
Stop it. Pat also asks, will the Reds be adding at the trade deadline? And I just thought it was interesting. Now that you've seen this team play a little bit, if you had to project them out, addition or subtraction at the trade deadline?
I think what'll happen is if they really are sneaking on in around the trade deadline, I still wonder if they go Baltimore Orioles a little bit and they say, we're trusting the process. This wasn't supposed to be a year that we're going for it. We're going to clutch our pearls a little bit. We'll maybe add a low-level relief pitcher or something like somebody that does not require anyone near the top 20 of Reds prospects. Maybe they do that then, but I don't see them making a big deal at the trade deadline if they're in contention.
Sorry, Jeff. There's a lot to wade through today. Hang on. When will we see Will Benson fan club t-shirts? That's not out of the realm of possibility out there. I mean, we've seen things that, right, when Puig was popular and in right field, the whole thing developed around him playing right field. I could see something out in the outfield sections. We saw a Wade Miley fan club for a while. One thing that seems to happen is once a guy is embraced by the city, these little clubs of people pop up and have little areas in the ballpark. I could see something like that happening.
It'd be kind of cool. I'm trying to think of a catchy name. I think that if Will Benson takes off very quickly, maybe you like cordon off part of the bleachers and you call them Benson's Bleachers or something. I don't know. Not going to do Wild Horse Club or something like that. That's already been taken.
BR7 asks, how many times will India be hit by a pitch this year? He's already started off with it. He's been plunked a couple times already.
He got hit in camp. He got hit in practice. Graham Ashcraft hit him. It's just like, this guy he's a magnet. Like, is he going to be the Reds' Craig Biggio? Like, for some reason, he just draws hit by pitches. And I don't know that that's a ability. I think it's very concerning because just about every time that happens, you're just like, don't be hurt, don't be hurt, don't be hurt. But I mean, it gets him on base. So,
I don't know if you ever listen to the opposing team's feeds when you're watching games. I do sometimes, yeah. But I watched the Reds Dodgers game on MLB TV the other day, and for whatever reason, the WLW feed wasn't available through MLB TV. I could only get the Dodgers feed that day. And so I was listening to the Dodgers broadcasters, and I don't think I knew this, talking about being hit by pitches. And on the other side of things, the Reds pitchers, did you know that they led the major leagues last season?
Yeah.
And hit.
Well, Nick Lodolo was super high himself.
Right. So interesting take, and I think this is probably just a case of, visiting announcers that don't really know the team very well. But, they were citing, well, that's what happens when you have a young team and inexperience and they just don't quite have the control. And I'm like, no. That pitch goes there on purpose. The fact that he hit so many people with that pitch is because it went exactly where it was supposed to go. And, I know that Nick, this just brought this thought to my mind, talking about India being hit by pitches, but I know that Nick Lodolo has talked about trying to get just a little bit more control on that, to just get it close, but not nick the guy. But, that pitch is so nasty. I want him to continue to throw it and not mess with it too much. And if that means he hits a few guys along the way, I'm okay with that.
Well, and think about the psychological effect that has on the guy in the on deck circle. He's just like, crap, man, I got to be ready for this. And if it's coming at my foot, I'm either going to take it and go down to first, or I'm going to jump out of the way. So you just have that extra thought process in the guy's mind. I love it too. Like I had no problem, because that was a stat that anytime somebody liked to bump it on Twitter and be like, look how many hitters that Nick Lodolo's hit this year, he must not be that good. It's like, well, you must not be watching very closely, because the pitch that he's throwing is a heck of a pitch. And I don't want that to change hardly at all. Like, if he could somehow still maintain its effectiveness and not hit guys, I wonder, because if you move it a little bit over, then it's over the plate, and then it probably becomes a hit. So I don't think I want him to worry too much about moving that pitch.
Yeah, if he, what did he hit? 19 guys last season. I think that's the number that's sticking out in my head, right? 19 dudes that he hit, and maybe if we can cut that down to 12 or 13 dudes throughout the course of a year, I'll live with that all year long. If it means,
think of that too. Like, if you can cut that's 7 more outs. That's probably lowering his ERA another like 1/10 of a run or something like that. That's pretty solid.
I'll definitely take that. Jared says he doesn't know why Myers needs to be resurgent. This is based on some of the things we've said, some of the chat conversation. He always puts up good numbers, just needs to stay healthy. This is the part. He will rake at Great American Ballpark. I think that's kind of what we all think, that him playing 81 games at Great American Ballpark is going to have a really positive effect on his overall production for the year. That ballpark and his skill set match up nicely.
Oh, 100%. And I probably used the wrong word there because I think I said resurgent Will Myers. It's not as if he has struggled, but maybe to expound on the thought a little bit, because we compared him a couple of weeks ago, to Nick Castellanos, and career-wise, they're very similar. But Will Myers has never had a singular season like Nick Castellanos had in 2021 when he played 81 home games at Great American Ballpark. So that could be interesting. Could Will Myers be headed for a anomalous season like Nick Castellanos? Because Nick Castellanos was always a solid hitter, but he was really good in 2021. Could Will Myers be really good in 2023?
Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily line up with like the Brandon Drury story, right? It's
not coming out of nowhere.
Because he's not coming out of nowhere. Correct.
Yeah.
And speaking of Brandon Drury, Debbie Brown points out, hi, Debbie, glad you're here. She says they have Brandon Drury in Milwaukee. That's 3 former Reds, because they also have Tyler Naquin. So, we joke about the Seattle Mariners being Cincinnati West. The Brewers are kind of becoming Cincinnati North.
Yeah, but I think it just speaks to the fact that, and as much as it pains us to say, because we all saw this as fans, but like the Reds were onto something with the guys that they had on the roster the last couple of years. And for some reason, they just didn't want to hold them all at the same time.
See, Debbie got me. I should read the rest of the thing because Brandon Drury was with the Angels.
Yeah.
I thought he was with Milwaukee too. I don't know why that was in my head. Maybe he was talking to the Brewers at some point. Maybe that was in the narrative for a minute.
I think I saw that rumor too, but yeah, I was like, I thought he was an Angel. I was like looking that up to make sure, but had me.
Sorry, Jeff. We're going to take a couple more and then we're going to get out of here for the day.
Yeah, we're leading into the Reds game. It's kind of fun. I mean, we didn't plan this to be a live pregame show. It's kind of turning into that a little bit. And just a shout out real quick, they got a pretty nice lineup. Like, I don't know that I would call it an opening day-esque lineup, because there's probably a few guys in here that won't be on the opening day lineup, but you have India and Stevenson, then you have Myers and Fraley, then you have Pender, Casale, Friedel, Newman, Steer. None of those names are like obscure and you're like, oh, none of those guys are going to have a chance to start. All of these guys could have a chance to start today. And then you got Luke Weaver on the mound too. We've been talking a lot about him, and there's been a lot said about Luke Weaver possibly making the starting rotation. He's going to go up against the White Sox and Dylan Cease for today's game, which I think is just on the radio. I don't think we have another televised game until tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up right now and see if there's a MLB TV feed for everybody. But
I think the White Sox are also a team that for some reason doesn't televise a bunch of spring training games. I don't understand why in 2022, and I don't want to get on a soapbox about this, but I don't understand why in the year of our Lord, which I guess is 2023, they don't have every spring training game televised. Like,
yeah, I tweeted this out earlier too. Like, I don't get it. And Major League Baseball, I think at one time has cited production costs. Listen, you've got radio crews at every stadium already. Set up one darn camera in the press box and overlay the audio feed. That's all you have to do in order to at least have some coverage. And if they want to do some real production, I would even pay a little bit extra every year for MLB TV if it included an add-on or whatever for all of the spring training games. I would totally do that. Circling back to Will Myers for just a second. Danny thinks that if he stays healthy and plays all year, he'll, be a 25-25 guy, steal 25 bases, hit 25 home runs. I don't know if he'll steal 25 bases, but I could see him hitting 25 home runs at Great American Ballpark.
The homers is definitely something I could see. Don't think steals. He only had 2 steals last year. I don't know that was by design or not, but 25 steals would be the second most steals he's had in his career. When he was an all-star in 2016, he had 28 steals that year. The only other year that he had 20 was 2017. So it's been a few years since he's really stolen that many bases. 25 and 25 would be amazing. And it would follow along with what we're talking about with the Reds prioritizing team speed. But I don't think Will Myers is part of that prioritization. I think it's mostly focused on, Will Benson and Jonathan India and, guys like that.
Debbie says she sees a feed on an MLB. Is that Debbie? If you're still in the chat, is that MLB Network? Because I don't see it on MLB TV. Let me know where you're seeing that if you see it out there. I want to get into this. We got a great nickname already for Will Benson's fan club, Benson's Battalion. How's that, Jeff? You see the shirts out there? Maybe some guys in like army hats, the camo Reds hats that come out on Military Appreciation Day. You know, like Benson's Battalions.
Don't give people in Southwest Ohio a reason to wear camo. They've already got a lot. They're already wearing a lot. But no, that would be kind of cool.
That's funny.
I like Benson's Battalion, though. I'm down with that.
Debbie says MLB Network. So it looks like you can see the game on MLB Network. So let's.
That must be the White Sox broadcast then? I'm not
must
sure.
Be the well, no, but I don't. It might be an MLB Network exclusive because I don't see the Chicago feed listed on MLB TV. So
I wonder if it's Matty V and Eduardo Perez.
So I'll have to go check that out. Let me find one more question, Jeff. While I do that, tease our Monday show one more time.
Yeah. So on Monday, we are going to discuss what David Bell can do to earn a contract extension. He's on his final year of his contract. The Reds have a wide range of outcomes. And is it a foregone conclusion he's just going to get another year, or is this something he could earn a multiple year extension? We're going to discuss that a lot more on Monday because, I mean, David Bell has been here for a couple of different iterations of Reds ball clubs, and now we're looking at, okay, they're building for the future. Is David Bell part of that future?
And since we, kind of tried to temper the hype train this week, and we are usually the optimistic bunch, let's end on an optimistic note. I like this comment. Malachi says he believes the Reds will be last year's Orioles by actually making a run towards the postseason. Jeff, you and I have both kind of teetered on the edge of this, where if you squint real hard and tilt your head kind of sideways, you can see them at least being in the conversation towards the end of the season. Where are you at on this?
There's certainly a ton of question marks, and they all have to be answered in a positive way for this to happen. But I don't think that's far-fetched. The guys that they're calling up now, and I've said this multiple times over the last year, the guys that they're calling up now are so much better than the guys that they were calling up in the period between 2015 and 2019. Those guys that they were calling up, they were really just kind of hoping that they hit on them, but they did not have a deep farm system at that time. And there was a lot of guys who were just kind of getting toward the point where they were graduating from the minors, but they were really just quadruple A guys. I don't look at a lot of players that are supposed to be called up this season and think quadruple A. I look at a lot of them and I think future stud for this team. There's not one of these guys that I have a worry of, boy, they're really going to be duds, and I just hope they prove me wrong. I'm the opposite. They are innocent until proven guilty, and I think that that's the way that I look at this entire team. That being said, you're still worried about the bullpen. How does it hold up? Is it going to be a detriment to this team? In the last half of last season, it wasn't that bad, but we know bullpen is, relief pitching is a fickle thing. So how's that play out? How does Green, Liddell, and Ashcraft take a step forward, maintain their health, and lead this rotation that without them is super susceptible? So we can't see them missing significant time. And then who steps up in the 4 and the 5 spot in that starting rotation? There's so many questions past that, but those are the big ones that I look at and I say, I don't know that every single one of those will be answered in a positive way. So I still say, 75 wins is where my optimistic expectations are. And then I hope they can jump from there, but I'm not going to say that I expect them to make that jump.
And that's where I am. There, you just did a great job of outlining a lot of the questions, and you're right. There's even more questions. That list of questions can go on and on for a long time, and that's why I'm reluctant to say, they're gonna at least be in consideration for that final wild card spot. But I do think that baseball being baseball, it's not a 0% chance that they're at least in the conversation. Now, maybe they don't make that final wild card, but I think that we'll be talking about them more in August and September this year than we were last year. And I think nationally, they'll be talking about them more in August and September this year than they were last year. And that's an improvement. That's moving in the right direction. And even if they don't quite hit this year, it puts us in line for what you and I have talked about, which is the likelihood that 2024 is going to be spectacular around here. So, I'm excited to see how it plays out.
2% chance to make the playoffs. They didn't say 0.
2%. It's better than 0. That's right. All right, Jeff, I think that's a good spot to go ahead and call this one. Once again, thanks for everybody that's been in the live chat and asking questions and commenting. And I know you crazy animals have been having side stuff over there. Yes, you did distract me a few times. Yes, you did throw me off a few times. You guys do you. That stuff's never going to make it onto the show, though. But I appreciate the baseball questions. I appreciate you guys talking about this team and caring about this team as much as Jeff and I do. I love these shows. We will do a couple more Aloha Friday lives. And then once the season gets here, they'll stop for the season. They'll be back next off season. But Jeff and I are cooking up some plans for some lives here and there, maybe some pre-games, things like that. So with all that being said, Jeffrey, take us home.
That's going to do it for us here today. Can't wait for the game that's coming up here in just a few minutes. Luke Weaver towing the rubber against Dylan Cease and the White Sox. And as Debbie Brown said, check it out on MLB Network. But that'll do it for us here today. Now check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast, as Matt and Dom will help you win your league with great fantasy draft strategies as we head into fantasy draft season. That's Locked On Fantasy Baseball, just like Locked On Reds. It's free and available on all platforms, and we're all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Steve, as we continue to move through spring training, as we continue to wonder about the return of Joey Votto, what we might see out of Nick Senzel, if we see anything at all, and the rest of the question marks that the Reds have, what can people expect from you and me?
Well, they can expect us to have the energy, the hype, and the passion for the Cincinnati Reds. We're going to be dialed into the transactions, the rumors, the waivers, and everything that happens between now and opening day. We're going to report back to you all right here and keep you locked on Reds every single day.
Benson's